Hey guys, welcome back. If you've been here, if you've been here before, if you've watched before, if not, welcome to you. So we continue with our talk regarding the Qur'an being created or uncreated. Now we've reached the final part of this section, in my understanding, which is the other side's view. Those who say that the Qur'an is uncreated and eternal. What do they have to say? So let's see. What do they have to say anyway? Peace be with you, by the way. I didn't say that. Before anything, so we'll get to it. Before anything, I begin in the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. I praise and I glorify him as he ought to be praised and glorified. Regarding the proofs of those that hold to the eternality of the Qur'an, they consist of intellectual proofs as well as textual proofs from the Qur'an and Sunnah, prophetic tradition. Regarding their intellectual proofs, they consist of a lot of conflicting and confusing statements. One could simply read one of their books or tracts, meaning like a pamphlet or small treatise, or tracts on the issue and see that there is much confusion, as evident of their circular arguments. We confine ourselves to just one of their statements. They say that since the Qur'an is the speech of God, since it's the speech of God, and the speech of God is in eternal quality, abiding with him, the Qur'an is therefore eternal. That's what they say. So basically, that since in their belief, the speech of God is an attribute which abides with him eternally. Therefore, the Qur'an is eternal. Why? Because it's his speech. Okay. The weakness of this proof is evident because they are mixing two types of divine speech. As we mentioned, some of the theologians have adopted the term kalamun nafsi or kalamun dhati to refer to an eternal speech that exists with the essence of God. So that speech, you could call it self-speech. It exists with the essence of God, meaning it's like a kind of attribute. It's a kind of essential attribute. Well, they called it that. They called it kalamun nafsi, kalamun dhati. The Ash'aris, if I'm not mistaken, it was them. However, they equally affirm that this type of kalam, speech, exists without letters or words. So the speech that they're referring to does not involve words or letters. I remember being taught this. The speech they're referring to does not involve words or letters. It's a kind of divine speech. Because it is obvious that the Qur'an consists of letters and words, their argument falls flat. It falls flat because the Qur'an consists of letters and words. How can it be of the speech you're talking about, which is without letters and words? If one wants to use the term kalamun nafsi, kalamun dhati, or any other term for that matter to refer to the eternal speech of God, this is fine. Basically, if they want to do that, fine. However, one must not mix this term with the speech of revelation, kalamul wahi, the speech of revelation, used by God to convey his will to his prophets. May God bless them all. Both are divine speech, one of which abides with the essence of God, and the other is revealed to the hearts of human beings by means of angels. By the way, this is not what we believe. This is just for the sake of argument. So if they want to say that there is a speech of revelation that he conveys to his prophets, and then there's that speech which abides with God, with the essence of God, and the other is revealed to the hearts of human beings. Yeah, so with the essence of God, and the other is revealed to the hearts of human beings by means of angels, that's fine. So one speech is that which is revealed to us, and the other speech is the speech that they say is eternal with God, for the sake of argument. What they do, though, is they mix the two together. They say that this eternal speech that God has that does not involve letters or words is different. Is the same as the speech of the Qur'an. How can that be when the Qur'an has letters and words? That's what they're implying. So God differentiates these two types of speech by his words. Say, meaning say to who? To Muhammad. The Qur'an is to Muhammad, right? Revealed to Muhammad. Say, if the ocean were ink for the words of my Lord, the oceans would deplete before the word of my Lord depletes. Before the words of my Lord deplete. Even if we came with its like. That means that the oceans would, if the oceans were ink and God's words, so if the oceans were ink for the words of God, then though the oceans would deplete. You would run out of ocean. You'd run out of ink. God's words, there would still be more to say. And then there's another verse. This is, by the way, why they included this. I had to consult the Imam Rasi Society, and thanks to their patience with me, they were able to help me out with this part of this section. So that's the first verse, and that's found in Qur'an 18:109, Surah Al-Kahf, the cave, if I'm not mistaken. And there's another verse, and if all of the trees on earth were pens, and the oceans were ink, in brackets, and then replaced by 7 more oceans, the words of God would not be exhausted. You can replace them with 7 more oceans, still there would be more to the word. The words of God would still continue. So, by the way, what it means when it says in the previous verse, say if the ocean were ink for the words of my Lord, the oceans would deplete before the words of my Lord deplete, even if we came with its like. I believe even if we came with the like of that ocean, meaning even if we came with another ocean, still the words of God would not deplete. So that's their argument. From what I understand, two of their arguments why the speech of God is eternal, but that does not imply that. In any case, yet he says concerning the Qur'an, verily it is a noble Qur'an in a book well preserved. Qur'an 56:77-78. This demonstrates that there are words that cannot be written by the ink of creation. However, there is no doubt that the Qur'an is written with the ink of pens in books. Therefore, one type of speech is not the other. So if they want to say that a kind of speech is not written, fine. But don't mix them up. They can't mix them up, because if they do, then how is it that speech that does not consist of letters and words that they mention, how is it that they made their way into text? Whether it's in the English translation of the Qur'an or in the Arabic Qur'an, which Gabriel came with. So that's one argument. Second, this may be a 2-part episode due to I became a bit short on time, but it's okay. Second, they say that God proves their belief in the eternality of the Qur'an by the verse, His is the creation and the command. Qur'an 7:54. They argue that since creation is distinct from command by the use of the conjunctive and is a conjunction, it's a conjunctive word, it would thus follow that His command in the form of His speech is not created. So they say, using the verse, His is the creation and command. Because of that, and they say that these are two separate things, meaning that the creation is created and the command is not created because of the word and. So therefore the creation is distinct, because the creation is distinct from command. The use of the by the use of the conjunctive and, the word and, it would thus follow that His command in the form of His speech, His command in the form of His speech is eternal, is created, is not created. Sorry, they would say it's not created, it's eternal. This argument is untenable due to several reasons. One reason is that the conjunctive "and" doesn't always connote that two things are distinct. For example, God says, these are the verses of the book and the Qur'an that makes things clear. 27:1. No one argues that the book and the Qur'an are two different things simply because the conjunctive is used. So "and" is used, Qur'an and book. But is the Qur'an any different than the book? No. Another reason is that command, as defined by the exegetes, those who commentated on the Qur'an, means his managing the affairs of his creation. So that command means God's managing the affairs of his creation. The context of the verse proves proves what we are saying. So the context of the verse proves what we are saying. God begins the holy verse by saying, "Your Lord is God, who created the heavens and earth in 6 days. Then he established himself on the divine throne. He draws the veil of night over the day, each one seeking the other by following it. The sun, moon, and stars are subject to his command." Qur'an 7:54. Then the Exalted says, "His is the creation and the command." It is clear from the context that command refers to God's subjecting his creation, God's dominance over his creation. The context does not mention God's speech as being the command mentioned, and therefore it cannot serve as a proof for the eternality of the Qur'an. Cannot serve as that. If you argue with these people, my guess is if they're dishonest, they'll gaslight you. They'll try to make you look like you're wrong, when in reality, they are openly, clearly, obviously wrong. Third, the proponents of the eternality of the Qur'an say that the verse, "We have not created the heavens, the earth, and everything between them except by truth." Qur'an 15:85. So when God says we have not created the heavens, the earth, and everything between them except by truth, Qur'an 15:85 proves their doctrine, because by truth mentioned in the verse refers to his command, be. When God says be, it refers to his command, be. And his command to create creation cannot be created itself. So the proponents of the eternality of the Qur'an, they say that the verse, "We have not created the heavens, the earth, and everything between them except by truth," it proves their doctrine. Why? Because by truth, mentioned in the verse, that the word truth refers to his command. Be refers to his command, be. And his command to create creation cannot be created itself. So his command to create creation cannot be created itself. That command, be, cannot be created itself. So it's uncreated. It thereby follows that his speech is eternal, and that since the Qur'an is his speech, it is therefore eternal. This argument is weak for the following reasons. First, the phrase "by truth" in no way denotes God's speech. This is not proven either linguistically or textually. Second, by truth means that God did not create creation in futility. He did not create it without a purpose, without a point. That's what it means. It means that God did not create creation in futility. As he says in another verse, "We did not create the heavens, the earth, and everything between them in jest." We didn't create them as a kind of joke or as a kind of just without any purpose, in jest. We did not create them except by truth. Qur'an 44:38-39. You see how you can use one part of the Qur'an to interpret the other part of the Qur'an? Use the Qur'an to make tafsir of the Qur'an. That's the first way that the first source that a person should go to when he wants to interpret the Qur'an is the Qur'an itself. Another verse clarified the other. One verse clarified the other. But still, the other verse was clear anyway. But for further, if someone wants further clarification, it's here. It's in the Qur'an. It's here and it's in the Qur'an. So, okay. So we did not create them except by truth. Qur'an 44, 38 to 39. Third, even if the term by truth meant God's commanding the creation, this would not prove the eternality of the Qur'an. As we mentioned and proved, God's eternal speech is distinct from his revealed speech. So for the sake of argument, God's eternal speech is distinct from his revealed speech, the speech that he reveals to mankind. Fourth, as we previously mentioned, God's command, be, does not denote actual speech by means of sound and letters. It is simply allegory that denotes the means by which God's command is executed. It's an allegory. It's metaphorical that denotes by the means by which God's command is executed. It's not an actual, literal, he's using a language. No. Fourth, they say that the eternality of the Qur'an is proven by the exalted statement. God's statement, the most merciful, taught the Qur'an, he created man. The most merciful, meaning God, taught the Qur'an, he created man. Qur'an 55, 1 to 3. Their argument is that since God says that the Qur'an is said to be taught and not to be created, it means that it is eternal. They also say that their argument is strengthened by the fact that immediately after that verse, man is said to be created, thus emphasizing the distinction between the two acts of God. Okay. This argument is weak for several reasons, one of which is that simply because something is said to be taught doesn't mean that it wasn't created. For example, in the very next verse, God says he taught him speech. Verse 4. He taught him speech. Verse 4. No one argues that human speech is eternal. So why would one affirm that because it is said to be taught, it is not created? Fifth, they say that because human speech is differentiated from God's speech in the verse, this is nothing but the word of a human being. Qur'an 74:25. They use the verse, this is nothing but the word of a human being. So they said because human speech is differentiated from God's speech in the verse, this is nothing but the word of a human being. Qur'an 74:25. The characteristics of human speech, like words, letters, and the like, cannot be ascribed to God's speech. This, they say, points to it being uncreated. So this, they say, it points to the Qur'an being uncreated because human speech is not the same as God's speech. This argument is not substantiated by the fact that the verse does not state that it is not human speech. The verse does not state that it is not human speech. On the contrary, many verses testify that it is in the Arabic language, the Qur'an. So the verse doesn't say that it is not human speech. Does not state that it is not in human speech. It is not in human speech. It doesn't say it's not in human speech. It says this is nothing but the word of a human being. It doesn't say this is not in human speech. On the contrary, many verses testify that it is in the Arabic language. For example, the exalted God says, and if we would have made it a non-Arab Qur'an, they would have said, meaning a non-Arabic Qur'an, they would have said, why aren't its verses in detail? How can it be, in brackets, how can it be a non-Arab Qur'an, in brackets, how can it be a non-Arabic Qur'an or a non-Arab Qur'an and an Arab messenger? Qur'an 41:44. And we have made it an Arabic Qur'an so that you will understand. Qur'an 43:3. Similarly, other verses mention that it is speech that is heard, such as, verily, we have heard an amazing Qur'an. Remember the jinn? They heard the Qur'an. We have heard an amazing Qur'an. It's audible. Qur'an 72:1. And if any of the polytheists seek protection from you, grant it to them so that he may hear the speech of God. Qur'an 9:6. The fact that the medium of revelation is human speech, the fact that it's between humans, that it's spoken, the medium of revelation is human speech, does not prove that its origins are human. The fact that the medium of revelation is human speech, just because it's in human speech used by humans, does not prove that its origins are human. This is the import of the verse. This is nothing but the word of a human being. God the Exalted distinguishes the speech of revelation from the speech of the opponents in that they are not able to produce the like of this Qur'an. God challenges them with his statement, and if you are in doubt as to what we have revealed from time to time to our slave, meaning Muhammad more than likely, then produce a chapter like it, and call your witnesses or helpers besides God if you are true. Qur'an 2:23. If the Qur'an was revealed in a language other than that of the Arabs that the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him and his progeny, was sent among, such a challenge would be null and void. So God would not have, God would not challenge, God's challenge would be null and void if he did not reveal the Qur'an in Arabic. So just because the medium of revelation, I believe, is the language. So just because the Arabic language is human speech does not prove that its origins are human. If they say that human speech is words, letters, it doesn't point that the origin of the Qur'an is human, or the origins of the Qur'an are human. So the commentators say, if the Qur'an was revealed in a language other than that of the Arabs, that the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, and his progeny was sent among, such a challenge would be null and void. So the challenge that God says, and if you are in doubt as to what we have revealed from time to time to our slave, meaning Muhammad, then produce a chapter like it, produce one like it, and call your witnesses or helpers besides God, your idols more than likely, or anyone else, perhaps idols, I believe. And call your witnesses or helpers besides God if you are true. Qur'an 2:23. If the Qur'an was revealed in a language other than that of the Arabs, that the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him and his progeny, was sent among, such a challenge would be null and void. After carefully examining the arguments and counter-arguments mentioned above, it should be apparent to the one who is not blinded by the veil of sectarian strife and unfounded views that the Qur'an is a creation of God. It should be apparent that the Qur'an is a creation of God, the Exalted. One could readily see that the proofs for the creation of the Qur'an are a lot more decisive and explicit than the proofs, quotations, proofs, for the eternality of the Qur'an, all of which are weak and subject to a wide variety of interpretations. We ask the lover of truth to cast aside the darkness of his or her preconceived notions and open their eyes to the glaring truth. Open your eyes to the truth. Open your eyes to the truth. The arguments that those who say that the Qur'an is uncreated are weak. Weak. They're not strong arguments. They're all weak. Everything that we have said concerning the Qur'an, regarding its being created, the evidence that we presented was all either from the Qur'an or basic intellectual understanding. The defense we used was intellectual and textual, or from hadith, prophetic narrations. So you see, they say that because human speech is differentiated from God's speech in the verse. I just want to repeat it in case it wasn't clear, because it somewhat wasn't clear to me. Fifth, they say that because human speech is differentiated from God's speech in the verse, this is nothing but the word of a human being. 74:25, the characteristics of human speech, like words, letters, and the like, cannot be ascribed to Allah's speech, to God's speech. This, they say, points to it being uncreated, because the words, letters, and the like cannot be ascribed to God's speech, meaning it's human. So thus, they say, points to it being uncreated. The Quran is uncreated because it cannot be the word of man. It cannot be ascribed to that attribute of speech, the essential speech that does not have words, letters of God. They're saying the word of human language cannot be ascribed to God's way of communicating, God's speech, which is without language, without words and letters. But the Qur'an was revealed in the Arabic language. God revealed it in the Arabic language. So God never said, the verse does not say that it is not in human speech. It never said it is not in human speech. It is in human speech. God revealed it in Arabic. On the contrary, many verses testify that it is in the Arabic language. And we mentioned those verses that it is in the Arabic language. So God revealed it in human speech. He revealed it in human speech. The fact that the medium of revelation, the language, is human speech, does not prove that its origins are human. That does not prove that its origins are human. So it's not to say that humans, this is a human speech and God's speech. I believe, my understanding is that God's speech is different than, meaning the way that God's speech that they say abides with God forever, without letters, without words, that speech and human speech are two different kinds of speech, yet they say that the Qur'an and God's speech are basically one. Okay, that's what they say, because there's two kinds of speech. They said that it's one. The Qur'an is created. The fact that the Qur'an is in the Arabic language doesn't mean that that the origin of the Qur'an is the fact that it's in words and letters does not and a language does not mean that the Qur'an is in a language other than originates or came from a non-human, or rather its origins are does not prove it does not prove that its origins are human. The meaning of the verse, this is nothing but the word of a human being. God the Exalted distinguishes the speech of revelation from the speech of the opponents in that they are not able to produce the like of this Qur'an. God challenges them, those people. Because what happens is those people said, this is nothing but the word of a human being. They were, I believe what happened is those people were challenging God. I wish there were more details in this paragraph. They were challenging the Prophet Muhammad, saying these are not but the words of a human being. These are just words of a human being. So God says, God says, so what happened is that God challenges them with his statement. And if you are in doubt, if you are in doubt as to what we have revealed from time to time to our slave, then produce a chapter like it and call your witnesses or helpers besides God, if you are true. So God is challenging them. They said this is not but human speech. God responded by telling them, if you doubt, then produce a surah like it. Produce a chapter like it. Qur'an 2:23. If the Qur'an was revealed in a language other than that of the Arabs, that the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and his progeny was sent among the Arabs, such a challenge would be null and void. So they were trying to use the argument, the Ash'aris, or those who use this argument from the Sunnis. They say that, well, it mentions in the Qur'an that human speech is different than God's speech. This is nothing but the word of a human being. The characteristics of human speech, like words, letters, and the like, cannot be ascribed to God's speech. This, they say, points to it being uncreated. Because human speech is not like God's speech, so it's uncreated. God's speech, Qur'an being the speech of God, the word of God, is uncreated. It's just I find it to be a confusing argument, but it's still proven wrong, because the Qur'an being revealed in the Arabic language indicates that who revealed the Qur'an? God. In a language, yes. Is it God's language? Is God's language the Arabic language? No. Did he speak to the angels? Meaning, does he communicate with angels using languages? No. He uses speech that the humans use. Even the metaphors that God uses in the Qur'an, even the metaphors are human metaphors. The words, the kind of speech that God uses is speech that we either understand or are capable of understanding. That's why he revealed it in the language of Arabic, because the Prophet Muhammad, who was the final messenger, who was sent to a group of Arabs, because he was sent to a group of Arabs. Not all the Arabs were around him, but he was sent to specifically, I'm talking specifically who he was sent to. When he was sent to a people using their dialect, their language, the language that the Qur'an was revealed in. That's what happened. So it cannot be that the Qur'an is uncreated because of it being using a language that humans use. And God's speech is different. They can say that God's speech, okay, fine, you want to say that God's speech is there? Well, it's proven wrong. There is no proof, by the way, that they have that God has a speech. God has there is no proof that God, if I'm not mistaken, there's no evidence that proves that God has an attribute of speech. What would that speech entail? They say that it doesn't include words, it doesn't include letters, it does. So what is speech? What is speech? I understand that we both believe, us and the Ash'aris, that God exists without a place. Okay. But when it comes to his form of communication, what is that? How does he communicate? They say that it's because if we say that God doesn't speak, it means that he's dumb. That's not true. It doesn't mean, if somebody's silent, does it mean that they're dumb? If someone is silent, does it indicate dumbness? Lack of being able to communicate? That's not true. So what they say, if somebody doesn't believe in attributes, they call them mu'attila. Mu'attila, someone who, I don't know the exact interpretation, but someone who denies attributes. They say people like us deny attributes. No, we did not deny attributes. We didn't deny attributes. We never said that God cannot speak. We never said that. We never said God does not have knowledge or God never had knowledge. Rather, we said that God's knowledge is an essential attribute. God's power is an essential attribute. when it came to speech, we said God is capable of speaking, of communicating, of revealing. However, there's no proof that we have encountered to indicate that God has an attribute called kalam, speech. If you want to say God is قادر على الكلام, or قادر على الكلام, he is able to speak, that's fine. He is able to communicate. He is able to do that, that's fine. But if you say that this is one of his divine attributes that existed with him forever, eternally, and then say on top of that that the Qur'an, because of that eternal attribute of speech, the Qur'an is also eternal because of the eternal attribute of speech of God, therefore it's eternal. That doesn't make any sense. I don't know if we went over that argument, but that's one of their arguments. God has the eternal attribute of speech. Kalamu dhati, kalamu nafsi. They made up this word, by the way. They made up this word. Now I will say that yes, there are words that we use, certain, you can say jargon, words that we use that philosophers may have used only for the purpose of defending certain issues. But we don't need those words. We don't need them, and we did not invent them. Not us, nor did the scholars of Adl. Meaning, I don't know about the Mu'tazila, but the Zaydis, Ahlul Bayt, the family of the Prophet did not invent words. This came later. Any Zaydi will admit this to you. So, this is not to push a Zaydi agenda or a Mu'tazili agenda. This has nothing to do with agendas. This has to do with the truth. So, you have to, if you're going to say there's an eternal speech abiding with God, then separate it from the speech which has been revealed in words and letters to us people. You have to separate the two. That's how it works. You cannot say that this is like this, therefore this is like that, and then and then glue them together. It doesn't work that way. Especially after when there is evidence that proves against that. And the brothers and sisters have told you that basically, may those of you who are people of truth, may you turn away from that way. And I invite you to turn away from that way. And I invite those who are non-Muslims to come to Islam as well. If you're non-Muslim, come to Islam. I invite you to Islam. You are welcome to Islam. Come to Islam. I invite those who are non-Muslims to come to Islam. We have the evidence that you want or need. We have it. In any case, that was our program today. As you can see, the days are getting shorter, which is, it's cool. It's great. I think I feel like I want this, the short days here on the northern hemisphere. In any case, so that's that. Next time we meet, next time we speak, we're going to discuss the Revelation. We're going to discuss the commentary on the words of Imam al-Hadi, peace be upon him. He revealed the Qur'an to his prophet, upon him be peace. So we're going to be talking about, I haven't read it yet, but we're going to be talking about the revelation of the Qur'an, in my understanding. The revelation of the Qur'an. Okay, guys? So, if you have any questions or anything, drop them in the comment box. Comments, questions, anything. And I'll get to them, God willing. Anyways, keep safe. Be well. Forgive the lighting. I just wanted to, I was almost done, so I figured I should just continue on. And I'll see you guys next time, the day after tomorrow, more than likely, God willing. And I hope we learn and grow together, God willing. So until then, or rather, I'll see you next time. Peace be with you, God willing.